The Cascade Range swallowed storms. In summer, both witnessed wars fought in distant lands by boys born in its shadow cradled the bones of those who climbed too high or stayed too long. Tonight it was keeping one more secret. Snow fell through darkness like ash from an invisible fire. Each flake descended without sound, accumulating on the road in layers that erased the boundary between asphalt and wilderness. 8 degrees below zero. The kind of cold that didn't announce itself with wind, just settled into bone and waited. Marcus Blackwood kept both hands on the wheel of his Ford F-150. 12 years old, rust blooming along the wheel well's passenger door handle, held together with electrical tape. The truck climbed the mountain road with stubborn determination, headlights carving tunnels through white curtains that revealed nothing but more white, more darkness, the same 50 yards repeated endlessly. Beside him, Ghost lifted his head. The German Shepherd was 6 years old, 94 pounds of black and tan fur over muscle and scar tissue. His right flank bore a diagonal mark where shrapnel had torn through during a patrol outside Kandahar. 3 surgeries saved his life, but ended his military career. The same explosion that retired the dog had also retired the man, now driving through a blizzard for reasons neither could fully articulate. Ghost's amber eyes focused beyond the windshield. His ears swiveled forward rigid. A low sound built in his chest, not quite a growl, more like a warning in a language older than words. "Easy," Marcus said. His voice was rough sandpaper over stone. 39 years had built a man who spoke only when silence failed. Probably dear. He eased off the accelerator anyway. The radio hissed static. Marcus had tried 3 stations in the last hour. All dissolved into white noise before the first song finished. Now he left it on the emergency channel, listening to automated weather warnings repeat every 11 minutes. Blizzard conditions, roads impassable, shelter in place. He should have turned back 20 miles ago. The thought arrived like an unwelcome visitor. Marcus Blackwood had spent 11 years in the Navy SEALs, earned the rank of E6, completed 4 tours across 2 countries that never appeared on his deployment papers. He'd learned to read terrain, sense danger and shadow angles, trust the instinct that lived below conscious thought. That instinct had kept him alive when others died. It had also taught him that survival and living were not the same thing. 3 hours earlier, he'd been welding a seam on a fishing trawler at the Seattle shipyard, where he worked 60 hours a week for $18 an hour. The foreman sent everyone home early when weather reports turned dire. Marcus drove to his trailer on the city's south edge, fed Ghost, and sat on the steps watching snow begin. Then the radio mentioned Cedar Ridge. Elderly couple reported missing near Cedar Ridge Memorial. Nathaniel and Eleanor Whitfield, both over 80, last seen 19 hours ago. Search and rescue suspended due to weather. Presumed lost. Presumed lost. The phrase had hooks. Marcus looked at Ghost. The dog looked back. Neither had anywhere they needed to be. Neither had anyone who would notice if they didn't come home. So Marcus started the truck. Ghost climbed in without being told, and now they were 47 miles from nowhere, driving toward people they'd never met for reasons that didn't survive scrutiny. The road curved left following the mountain's shoulder. Pine trees crowded close branches, bowed under snow weight. In the headlights, the world looked like a photograph fading to white. Ghost barked once, sharp, insistent. Marcus hit the brakes. The truck slid 15 feet before tires caught. The engine idled, pistons knocking with the rhythm of a vehicle driven hard and maintained poorly. Marcus peered through the windshield, searching for whatever triggered the dog's alarm. Nothing. Just trees and snow and darkness between them. Then he saw it. A light. Small and golden, flickering between trunks 60 yards right of the road. It wavered. Steadied, wavered again. The way candle flames move when someone walks past in another room. Marcus killed the engine. Sudden silence was absolute, broken only by cooling metal ticking and snow whispering against glass. He reached under the seat, pulled out a maglite, the heavy kind that doubled as a weapon. His other hand rested on Ghost's shoulder. "You sure?" The dog's body was tense, every muscle coiled. His gaze never left the light. Marcus pushed open the door. Cold hit like a physical wall, finding every gap in his coat, every inch of exposed skin. He zipped up to his throat, pulled on gloves, stepped into snow that rose past his ankles. Ghost jumped down beside him, landing silent despite his size. He sniffed the air, processing information Marcus couldn't access. Then he moved forward, not running, but walking with purpose, paws breaking through ice crust with each step. They left the road behind. The forest swallowed them within 20 paces. Pine trees grew dense here, lower branches creating a canopy that had kept some snow at bay. The ground was rocky, uneven, studded with roots that waited to catch unwary boots. Marcus used the flashlight, sparingly letting his eyes adjust between uses. The light ahead grew brighter. It took Marcus a moment to understand what he was seeing. Not a flashlight, not a headlamp, a lantern. Old-fashioned brass and glass, the kind his grandfather kept for power outages. A Coleman 1952, if he wasn't mistaken. The flame inside burned steady despite wind, despite snow, despite every law of physics that said it should have died hours ago. It sat on the ground beneath a massive cedar tree, its glow painting the snow in amber and gold. Ghost stopped 10 feet away. His hackles rose. The growl in his chest deepened, became something else. Not warning now. Mourning. Marcus moved closer, raising the flashlight. The beam caught something dark against pale bark. Not bark. Fabric. A coat. And inside the coat, a person. No. Two people. They hung from a lower branch suspended by rope tied around their wrists, boots dangling 18 inches above snow. An old man and an old woman, faces gray in the flashlight beam, eyes closed, bodies still. Marcus felt his pulse spike, adrenaline dumping into his bloodstream with familiar chemical burn. His training kicked in automatically, the sequence drilled across 1,000 simulations and 100 real emergencies. He closed the distance in 4 strides, pressing 2 fingers against the old man's neck. The skin was cold, waxy, wrong. But beneath the chill, something fluttered. Faint, irregular, a pulse that should have stopped but hadn't quite surrendered. Jesus, Marcus whispered. He grabbed the woman next, feeling for the same signs. Her pulse was even weaker, a ghost of a heartbeat barely there. They were alive. Marcus pulled out his knife, a fixed-blade Ka-bar he'd carried through 4 deployments. The rope was thick, military-grade paracord Type 3, rated for 550 pounds. Not the kind recreational hikers carried. Not the kind that ended up around someone's wrists by accident. He sawed through the first section, controlling the old man's descent as the cord parted. The body sagged into his arms, surprisingly heavy despite its frailty. Marcus lowered him onto snow, arranging him flat, checking for injuries beyond obvious hypothermia. The old man's lips moved, a whisper so faint Marcus had to lean close. "Michael, you came back." Marcus didn't correct him, no point. Confusion was a late sign of severe hypothermia, the brain misfiring as core temperature dropped below critical thresholds. He turned to the woman, cutting her down with the same care. She was lighter, more fragile bones, like bird wings beneath her coat. When he laid her beside the man, her eyes fluttered open. Pale blue, unfocused, searching for something that wasn't there. Her lips shaped words that barely reached the air between them. She put medicine in the vitamins. Then her eyes closed. Marcus stripped off his coat, heavy wool lined with fleece, and draped it over both of them. Not enough, not nearly enough. Air temperature 8 below zero. Wind chill pushed it lower. Even with the coat, even with the tree's shelter, they had minutes, not hours. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Expected. The mountains ate cell coverage like they ate everything else. Ghosts circled the scene nose low, reading the story written in scent and disturbance. He paused near the lantern, sniffed, then moved to disturb snow 15 feet away. He pawed at it, uncovering something small and plastic. A bottle. Marcus picked it up, turning it in the flashlight beam. Nature's Bounty Vitamin D3. The label pristine, safety seal unbroken. Except it was open, the cap lying separate in snow, and when Marcus shook it, the pills inside rattled with a sound that wasn't quite right. He pocketed the bottle. His mind was already working through logistics. 2 people, both critical, both hypothermic, both needing medical attention, measured in minutes. His truck 60 yards away through heavy snow. No phone signal, no backup, no time to wait for help that wasn't coming. He'd carried wounded men before. In Kandahar, after the explosion that took Jack and nearly took him. He'd hauled a 200-pound teammate 300 yards through hostile fire with a partially dislocated shoulder. He could do this. He had to. Marcus bent, working his arms under the old man, lifting him in a fireman's carry. The man weighed maybe 160, mostly bone and leather. Marcus stood, adjusting the weight, and started walking. Ghost led the way, finding the easiest path through trees, pausing whenever Marcus needed to rest. The journey to the truck took 8 minutes that felt like 80. Marcus laid the man across the back seat, then made the return trip for the woman. She was lighter but somehow harder to carry, as if fragility required more care than strength. Marcus held her like glass, stepping carefully, breathing hard, legs burning with the effort of moving through snow that rose past his knees in places. When he finally laid her beside the man in the truck, both wrapped in his coat and 2 emergency blankets from his storage bin, he allowed himself 10 seconds to breathe. His shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cold. His hands shook the old injury in his right shoulder, making itself known with sharp insistence. Ghost jumped into the passenger seat, turning to watch the two figures in the back. His amber eyes reflected the dome light, twin points of gold in darkness. Marcus started the engine. The heater blasted cold air, then lukewarm, then finally something approaching warmth. He set it to maximum, aimed all vents toward the back seat. The old woman's lips were moving again. Marcus leaned back, straining to hear. "The vitamins," she whispered. "She brings them. Every Tuesday. I feel sick after—" Her voice faded. Marcus watched her chest rise and fall, movements shallow but regular. He put the truck in gear and began the slow descent, driving one-handed while fumbling for the radio. The emergency channel crackled to life mid-sentence in another automated warning. Cedar Ridge Memorial Road closed due to avalanche risk. All search and rescue operations suspended until— Marcus switched it off. They drove in silence, only the engine's labor and tire chains scraping ice. Marcus checked the rearview mirror every 30 seconds, watching for signs of consciousness or deterioration. The old man's eyes remained closed. The woman's lips had stopped moving. 20 minutes down the mountain, headlights appeared in the mirror. Not civilian vehicle diffuse glow, but high-intensity spots mounted on a police cruiser. They grew brighter closer until the vehicle pulled alongside and gestured for Marcus to stop. He did, pulling onto a slightly wider shoulder section, putting the truck in park but leaving the engine running. Ghost's attention shifted to the side mirror, tracking the figure emerging from the cruiser. Sheriff Dawson was 59, carrying an extra 40 pounds around his midsection, face red from cold, and the high blood pressure that came with gas station food and stress. He wore a brown uniform jacket with fur collar, a campaign hat dusted with snow, and the expression of a man interrupted during something important. He approached Marcus's window, flashlight beam cutting through darkness. Marcus rolled down the glass. "You Marcus Blackwood," Dawson's voice carried flat authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "That's right. Heard you called in a rescue on the emergency frequency before signal cut out." "That them in back," Marcus nodded. Dawson directed his flashlight toward the rear seat, illuminating the two bundled forms. His expression didn't change. "Nathaniel and Eleanor Whitfield. Been looking for them since yesterday afternoon. How'd you find them?" "My dog. He led me to them. In a blizzard, at night, on a closed road." Dawson's tone suggested calculations that didn't add up. "That's some dog." Ghost, hearing himself referenced, turned his head slightly. His eyes caught the light, reflecting it back cold and amber. A low sound built in his chest, subtle enough Dawson might not have heard over the wind. But Marcus did. "They were hung from a tree," Marcus said, keeping his voice level. "By paracord, Type 3 military grade. Their lantern was still burning underneath them." Dawson's expression finally shifted, but not toward concern or alarm. Something else crossed his features, something that looked almost like resignation. "Hung from a tree," Dawson repeated slowly. "You sure about that?" "Positive. Cut them down myself." "Huh." Dawson shifted his weight, breath fogging the space between them. "See, thing is, Nate Whitfield's got some memory issues. Dementia, early stages. Last year he got lost trying to find his son's memorial stone up at Cedar Ridge. Took us 6 hours to locate him. And Eleanor, she's not much better. Alzheimer's, they think." Marcus said nothing, waiting. "What I'm saying is, couple of old folks with confused minds. They go wandering at night in a snowstorm, trying to light a lantern for some memorial tradition. They can barely remember, things can get mixed up. Rope gets tangled. They panic. Try to climb, get stuck." Dawson's voice was smooth, practiced. "Tragedy, sure, but not mysterious. Just old age and bad weather combining in an unfortunate way." "The rope was tied," Marcus said. "Professional knots, bowlines, around both wrists. Like I said, confusion. They might have been practicing something, gotten disoriented." Ghost growl became audible. Dawson's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Marcus. "You need to get that animal under control." "He's under control. He just doesn't like liars." The air between them changed temperature. Dawson's hand moved fractionally closer to his sidearm, a gesture he probably didn't realize he'd made. "I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that," Dawson said quietly. "You're going to follow me down to Cascade General. We'll get the Whitfields checked out, get statements, do this properly. And then you're going to go home and forget about playing detective. Clear?" Marcus held his gaze for 3 seconds longer than was comfortable, then nodded once. "Good." Dawson turned away, walking back toward his cruiser through snow that was falling harder now, erasing footprints almost as soon as they were made. Marcus rolled up the window. His hand found Ghost's head, fingers sinking into thick fur at the dog's neck. The growling stopped, replaced by steady breathing rhythm. In the back seat, the old woman's eyes opened again. This time they found Marcus in the rearview mirror, and for a moment they were perfectly clear, perfectly lucid. "Don't let her near the vitamins," she whispered. Then the clarity faded and she was gone again, lost in whatever maze her poisoned mind was navigating. Marcus watched Dawson's cruiser pull ahead, its light bar painting the snow red and blue. Through the rear window, he could see Dawson's silhouette, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his phone to his ear, making a call. At 2:40 in the morning, in a blizzard, after finding two elderly people who'd been left to die hanging from a tree. The conversation lasted 40 seconds. Marcus couldn't hear words, but he could read body language, the way Dawson's head tilted. The sharp gesture he made with his free hand. The pause before he nodded ended the call and tossed the phone onto his passenger seat. Ghost whined softly, a sound he rarely made. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I know." He put the truck in gear and followed the cruiser's taillights down the mountain toward the hospital, toward answers, toward whatever waited at the end of this night that had stopped feeling like a rescue and started feeling like something else. Behind them, invisible in the storm, the brass lantern still burned beneath the cedar tree. Its flame wavered in wind, but refused to die, illuminating nothing but snow and darkness, in the place where two people had almost ended. The mountains held their secrets, but sometimes secrets found their way out anyway. Sometimes they rode in the back seat of a 12-year-old truck, driven by a man who had nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. Sometimes they sat beside a dog who knew the difference between truth and lie, between accident and intention, between the kind of help that arrived in time and the kind that came with strings attached. The road descended, snow fell, night pressed close, and somewhere in the warmth, slowly returning to the back seat, two hearts that should have stopped kept beating, carrying with them a story someone had tried very hard to silence. The silence had failed. Now came the reckoning. Cascade General Hospital sat at the town's edge like a promise made in concrete and fluorescent light. Three stories built in the 1970s when optimism was still architectural, serving 11,000 people spread across 200 square miles of mountain territory. The emergency entrance glowed blue and white against pre-dawn darkness. Marcus pulled into the ambulance bay at 3:47. Dawson's cruiser was already there, the sheriff standing beside it with arms crossed, watching Marcus approach with the expression of a man supervising something he'd rather prevent. Two paramedics emerged with a gurney. They moved with practiced efficiency, loading Eleanor first, then returning for Nathaniel. Marcus stood in the cold and watched them work, his coat still wrapped around the old couple, his shirt freezing against his skin. Ghost remained in the truck, nose pressed to the window, breath fogging the glass. A doctor appeared, young and tired, scrubs wrinkled from a shift that had probably started yesterday. She asked Marcus 3 questions about how he'd found them, their condition when he arrived, any statements they'd made. He answered truthfully, leaving out only Eleanor's whispered warning. That felt worth keeping close. "You saved their lives," the doctor said. Her name tag read Doctor. "Amanda Reeves, Emergency Medicine. Another hour in that cold, they wouldn't have made it." Marcus nodded. Words felt unnecessary. "We'll keep them for observation. Severe hypothermia, possible frostbite, dehydration. But they're stable now. You did good." She disappeared into the building following the gurneys. Dawson approached, boots crunching on salted pavement. "I'll need a formal statement. Tomorrow when you're rested." "I can do it now." "Tomorrow," Dawson repeated, and there was something in his tone that wasn't negotiable. "Get some sleep. This isn't going anywhere." Marcus watched the sheriff's face, reading micro-expressions most people didn't know they broadcast. Tightness around the eyes. The way his jaw clenched on the left side. The subtle posture shifts suggesting he was guarding something. "Who did you call?" Marcus asked. "On the mountain after you found us." Dawson's expression went flat. "Dispatch. Standard protocol. At 2:40 in the morning, for 40 seconds. You counting my phone calls now?" "Just wondering who needs to know about 2 old people getting rescued at that hour. Who has that kind of investment?" The silence stretched like wire pulled taut. Somewhere inside the hospital, a machine beeped steady rhythm. A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer, then fading. "Go home, Mr. Blackwood," Dawson said quietly, "before you make this more complicated than it needs to be." Marcus held his ground for 5 more seconds, then turned and walked back to his truck. Ghost shifted to give him room as he climbed in the pony's amber eyes, tracking every movement Dawson made until the cruiser pulled away and disappeared into thinning snow. The drive back to Seattle took 2 hours. Marcus stopped once at a rest area just after dawn to let Ghost relieve himself and to stand in weak morning light, trying to remember how to feel warm. The mountain emergency had left something cold inside that had nothing to do with temperature. He thought about rope and knots, about a lantern that shouldn't have stayed lit, about an old woman whispering warnings about vitamins and poison while her body shut down from hypothermia. And he thought about Dawson's phone call made to someone who needed to know that Nathaniel and Eleanor Whitfield were still breathing. The bottle of vitamins sat in his glove box wrapped in an evidence bag he'd improvised from a Ziploc freezer bag. Marcus wasn't sure what he planned to do with it, but throwing it away felt wrong. His trailer sat in a lot on industrial Seattle's south side, surrounded by 12 other identical units, housing shipyard workers, day laborers, and people who'd run out of better options. Marcus paid $400 a month for 60 square feet of living space, a hot plate and plumbing that worked 3 days out of 5. He fed ghosts showered in water that never got quite hot enough and lay down on a mattress that came with the trailer. Sleep arrived like anesthesia, pulling him under without consent. He woke 6 hours later to his phone ringing. The number was local, but unfamiliar. Marcus let it go to voicemail, then listened while Ghost watched from his position by the door. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Dr. Isabel Grayson. I work at the Portland Toxicology Institute. A mutual friend suggested I give you a call regarding a matter of some urgency. Please return this call at your earliest convenience." The voice was professional, educated with a slight rasp of someone who'd spent too many years in laboratories breathing chemicals not meant for human lungs. Marcus recognized the name from somewhere in his past, from the years before the trailer and shipyard, when his life included people with doctorates and government clearances. He called back. Dr. Grayson answered on the second ring. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you for returning my call. How did you get my number?" "Russell Thornhill, FBI. He said you might need someone who understands poisons." Marcus sat up, the mattress creaking. "I don't know any Russell Thornhill. He knows you, or rather he knows your record. Navy SEAL 11 years, multiple commendations, specialty in direct action. You pulled 2 people off a mountain last night, people who may have been poisoned." A pause. "He also said you're stubborn, distrustful, and unlikely to cooperate unless I convince you this is legitimate. So here's my legitimacy. I'm 41 years old, PhD in toxicology. From Johns Hopkins, spent 8 years at the CDC before I got tired of bureaucracy. I now run an independent lab doing contract work for law enforcement. Russ sent me your case because he thinks someone is trying to kill Nathaniel and Eleanor Whitfield, and he thinks you might have evidence." Marcus looked at the glove box where the vitamin bottle waited. What makes him think that? Because people don't get hung from trees by accident, and because the Whitfield name has appeared in 3 other investigations over 18 months, all involving mysterious deaths near Cedar Ridge. Russ has been watching, but he can't move without proof. Physical, scientific proof that will hold up in federal court. What kind of proof? The kind you're holding in a plastic bag in your truck. The vitamins. Marcus stood, moved to the small window, looked out at the parking lot. Nothing moved except wind-blown trash and a gray cat hunting pigeons. If this Thornhill is FBI, why doesn't he just get a warrant? Because the person he suspects has more money than some countries and enough lawyers to bury any warrant in procedural challenges for years. He needs a smoking gun, not suspicion. He needs you to give him that gun. The line went quiet except for faint background, distant laboratory equipment sounds. "Send me the vitamins," Dr. Grayson said. "Overnight courier, anonymously if you prefer. I'll run full analysis. If there's anything in those pills that shouldn't be there, I'll find it, and I'll document it in a way that can't be dismissed or buried." Marcus considered. What does Thornhill get out of this? Justice, presumably. Or maybe just satisfaction of catching someone who's been untouchable for 3 decades. Does it matter? It might. Then ask him yourself. He'll be at the Riverfront Diner in Portland tomorrow at noon. Table in the back, drinking black coffee, reading the Wall Street Journal. He'll answer your questions. But bring the vitamins. The call ended before Marcus could respond. He stood holding his phone, weighing options that all felt like traps. Trust was currency he'd stopped trading after Kandahar, after watching Jack Rivera burn, because someone in the chain of command decided their mission wasn't worth proper intelligence support. Since then, Marcus operated on a simple principle: believe nothing, verify everything, never put your life in someone else's hands. But the old woman's whisper kept echoing. She put medicine in the vitamins. Ghost nudged his hand-cold nose, a point of contact pulling Marcus back to the present. The dog looked up with those amber eyes that seemed to carry more wisdom than any human Marcus had met in 5 years. "What do you think?" Marcus asked. Ghost tilted his head, considering. Then he walked to the door and sat waiting. Marcus packed a bag. The drive to Portland took 3 hours through rain replacing yesterday's snow as elevation dropped. Marcus took side roads, avoiding traffic, keeping the speedometer 5 under the limit. Old habits. The kind that kept you alive when enemies counted on predictable behavior. The Riverfront Diner occupied a corner lot near the Willamette River, the kind of place serving breakfast all day and attracting longshoremen truck drivers and people who valued quantity over presentation. Marcus arrived at 11:45, parked where he could watch the entrance and waited. Russell Thornhill appeared at 11:58. 47 years old, 6 feet tall, with the lean build that came from running rather than lifting. His suit was off the rack, but well-maintained shoes, polished but worn at the heels. FBI agents learned early that looking too prosperous raised questions, and Thornhill had clearly learned that lesson well. He took the corner booth, ordered coffee without looking at the menu, and opened a newspaper. The Wall Street Journal, exactly as advertised. Marcus gave it 5 more minutes, watching for surveillance, for partners, for any sign this was more complicated than a simple meeting. Then he left Ghost in the truck with the windows cracked and walked inside. Thornhill looked up as Marcus approached. "Mr. Blackwood, thanks for coming. You've got 10 minutes to convince me this isn't a waste of time." "Fair enough. Sit." Marcus sat, positioning himself to see both entrance and kitchen. The waitress brought coffee. He didn't touch it. Thornhill folded his newspaper. 4 years ago, a man named Richard Carrington died at his estate near Cedar Ridge. Natural causes, according to the coroner. Heart attack. He was 73, overweight, diabetic. No one questioned it, except Richard Carrington owned 86 acres of prime development land, and his death allowed that land to be sold to a development company for $42 million. Marcus listened. 2 years ago, Margaret Stinson, 81 years old, fell downstairs in her home. Broken neck, tragic accident. She owned 34 acres adjacent to the Carrington property. Her estate sold that land for $18 million. "People die," Marcus said, "especially old people." "They do. But it's interesting when they all die within 18 months, when they all own land in the same corridor, and when all their deaths benefit the same development company, a company called Cascade Premium Holdings." Thornhill slid a folder across the table. Marcus opened it. Inside were photographs, property records, death certificates. And in the center, a professional headshot of a woman with auburn hair, perfect makeup, and a smile that belonged in boardrooms or courtrooms or anywhere power was traded. "Vivian Ashford Harrington," Thornhill said. 51 years old, CEO of Cascade Premium Holdings. Harvard Law, top of her class. Inherited her father's real estate empire when he died in 1993. That empire was worth approximately $400 million. Today, it's worth $2.8 billion. Marcus studied the photograph. The woman looked like success, like control, like someone who'd never heard the word no and wouldn't recognize it if she did. "She's also been married 3 times, Thornhill continued. Husband number 1 died in 1993, accidental carbon monoxide poisoning. Number 2 died in 2004, fell off a yacht. Number 3 died in 2015. Overdose of sleeping pills combined with alcohol, all ruled accidental or self-inflicted. All left their estates to Vivian. You're saying she killed them. I'm saying she's the most successful serial killer in American history, and nobody's ever proven it, because she's smart, patient, and has enough money to make problems disappear." The waitress refilled Thornhill's coffee. They waited until she moved away. 3 weeks ago, Thornhill said, Nathaniel Whitfield filed a new deed with the county, updating his will to leave his 52 acres to his wife Eleanor. That land is worth $22.4 million. It's also the final piece of a development corridor that would allow Cascade Premium Holdings to build a luxury resort that's been in planning for 6 years. Without that land, the project is dead. With it, the project is worth an estimated $700 million in revenue over the next decade. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You think Vivian tried to kill them for the land?" "I think Vivian has been poisoning Eleanor Whitfield for the past 8 months, making it look like Alzheimer's disease. I think she planned to wait until Eleanor died, then comfort the grieving widower, marry him, and become sole heir when he inevitably followed his wife. I think you interrupted that plan by finding them on that mountain. Why hang them from a tree? Because making it look like a hiking accident is cleaner than a suspicious death at home. 2 confused elderly people wander into a blizzard, try to light a memorial lantern, get disoriented, and die of exposure. Tragic but explainable. No autopsies, no investigations, just sympathetic news coverage and a quiet estate sale 6 months later." Marcus leaned back, processing. "You've known about this for 8 months and done nothing. I've done everything I can without evidence. Filed reports requested, investigations tried to get warrants. All denied. Vivian has judges in her pocket, cops on her payroll, enough lawyers to fight any legal action for years. I need physical proof, something that can't be explained away or buried in procedural challenges. The vitamins. The vitamins. If Dr. Grayson finds what I think she'll find, we can build a case. Federal charges, attempted murder, conspiracy, maybe even exhume previous deaths and find patterns. But I need that bottle, Mr. Blackwood. I need you to trust me enough to hand it over. Marcus looked at the photograph of Vivian Ashford Harrington again, at the smile that didn't reach the eyes, at the perfect hair and perfect suit and perfect mask of someone who'd learned to hide monsters behind good breeding and better lawyers. Why me? Marcus asked. Why not just send local cops to collect evidence? Because Dawson is on Vivian's payroll, so is the coroner, Dr. Hammond, so are half the officials in that county. You were an accident, a variable she didn't plan for. And now you're the only person who can get this evidence into the right hands without it disappearing. The diner was filling with lunch crowd, construction workers, students, a young couple arguing quietly over a shared menu. Life continuing as if nothing mattered beyond the next meal, the next argument, the next small decision that wouldn't change anything. Marcus pulled the vitamin bottle from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. Thornhill's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed. Thank you. If you're lying to me, if this is some kind of setup, I'll find you. I believe you would. Thornhill slipped the bottle into an evidence bag, then into his briefcase. Doctor Grayson will have her results in 48 hours. I'll be in touch. He stood, left a 20 on the table for coffee that cost $3, and walked out. Marcus sat for another 10 minutes drinking the cold coffee, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life or the first right decision in years. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. They're moving Eleanor to a private room. 3rd floor. Vivian Ashford Harrington just arrived with flowers. No signature, but Marcus knew it was from Thornhill. He left the diner at a run. Cascade General was 97 miles away. Marcus made it in 74 minutes, pushing the Ford hard enough that the engine knocked in protest and Ghost braced himself against the door during turns. The clock on the dashboard read 2:17 when they pulled into the parking lot. Marcus took the stairs 3 at a time, Ghost keeping pace beside him. 3rd floor. The nurse's station sat empty, a half-eaten sandwich in a romance novel marking someone's interrupted lunch break. Room 312. The door was open. Inside, Eleanor Whitfield lay propped in the hospital bed, silver hair brushed and neat eyes closed. Beside the bed stood a woman who could only be Vivian Ashford Harrington. The photograph hadn't captured the presence the way she occupied space like it owed her deference. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck, pearl earrings catching fluorescent light, and she held a vase of white lilies in hands that looked like they'd never done manual labor. She was placing a small plate of brownies on the bedside table when Marcus entered. She turned and her smile was reflexive, practiced the kind deployed at charity galas and depositions. Oh, you must be the man who found them, Marcus Blackwood. Isn't it Sheriff Dawson mentioned you? I'm Vivian Ashford Harrington, the Whitfield's attorney. Her voice was cultured, East Coast educated. Warm the way expensive bourbon was warm. It went down smooth, but left a burn. Ghost entered behind Marcus. The transformation was immediate. His hackles rose, every hair from shoulder to tail standing on end. A growl built in his chest, low and continuous. The sound a wolf makes when defending territory. Vivian's smile faltered for half a second. Oh, you brought a dog. How unexpected. He doesn't usually react to people, Marcus said, watching her carefully. Only when something's wrong. Perhaps he's uncomfortable in hospitals. The smells, the sounds. She recovered her composure, the smile returning like a mask sliding back into place. In any case, I was just checking on Eleanor. Such a terrible ordeal. I'm so grateful you found them when you did. How did you know they'd be on the mountain? The question hung in the air. Vivian tilted her head, slightly expression curious. I'm sorry. You said it was terrible, but you're their attorney. How did you know about their tradition of lighting the lantern? Most lawyers don't keep track of their clients' memorial rituals. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, assessment, the look of someone recalculating odds. Nathaniel mentioned it during one of our meetings, she said smoothly. He's quite devoted to his son's memory. It's touching, really. Though tragic that such devotion nearly cost them their lives. Ghost took a step forward, the growl intensifying. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth designed for tearing. Control your animal, Mr. Blackwood. He's controlled. He just doesn't like you. Vivian's smile disappeared entirely. I don't particularly care what a dog likes or doesn't like. I came here to check on a client and friend. I'm leaving now. She moved toward the door. Marcus didn't step aside immediately, forcing her to angle past him. As she did, he caught the scent of her perfume, expensive floral with an undertone of something chemical and sharp. And on the plate of brownies barely visible, unless you were looking for it, a fine dusting of powder that looked like confectioner's sugar but had a faintly crystalline texture. Vivian paused at the threshold. The Whitfields are very fortunate to have such a dedicated rescuer. Though I wonder how long that dedication will last when you realize what you've stepped into. Some situations are more complicated than they appear, Mr. Blackwood. Some people have resources you can't imagine, and some fights aren't worth having. Is that a threat? It's advice, free of charge. Consider it a professional courtesy. She left, heels clicking down the corridor with the rhythm of someone who'd never had to hurry, never had to run, never had to worry about consequences catching up. Ghost watched her go, every muscle still tense. Marcus, Marcus moved to the bedside table. The brownies sat there looking innocent. Homemade, the label on the plastic container said. Vivian's delights since 1993, the year her first husband died. Marcus pulled out his phone, photographed the label, the brownies, the fine powder dusting their surface. Then he carefully moved the plate to the far counter out of reach. Eleanor's eyes opened. For a moment they were unfocused, searching. Then they found Marcus and became suddenly startlingly clear. You came back, she whispered. You're the one with the dough. Yes, ma'am. Don't let me eat those brownies. Don't let anyone bring me vitamins. She's been poisoning me for 8 months, making me forget, making me sick, making everyone think I'm losing my mind. Her hand reached out surprisingly strong and grasped Marcus's wrist. I've been recording her, when I can remember. When my mind is clear, there's a voice recorder. Sony, in my coat pocket. The coat they took from me when they brought me here. It has her real voice. What she says when she thinks I'm too far gone to remember. Her grip loosened. The clarity faded like morning fog burning off, and she was gone again, lost in whatever chemical maze had been built in her brain over months of systematic poisoning. Marcus found a nurse, explained that Eleanor was not to be given any outside food or vitamins without explicit approval from her primary physician. The nurse, young and overwhelmed by a shift that started at 6 that morning, nodded and made a note. Then Marcus went looking for Eleanor's coat. He found it in the patient belongings locker on the first floor, an ancient blue parka with fake fur around the hood, the kind sold at discount stores for $40. The pockets held tissues, hard candies, and in the inside breast pocket, exactly where Eleanor said it would be, a Sony SD PX470 voice recorder. Marcus took it to his truck, Ghost following like a shadow. The recording was 4 hours long, broken into dozens of segments. Marcus fast-forwarded through most of it, hearing Eleanor's voice talking to herself, reminding herself of names and dates and places, fighting against the fog in her mind. Then at timestamp 2 hours and 18 minutes, another voice. How are you feeling today, Eleanor? Did you take your vitamins? Vivian, unmistakable. Yes, this morning. They make me so tired. That's just your body healing, dear. The doctors say it's important to take them every day, especially the D3. Your levels are dangerously low. A pause, the sound of water being poured. There, drink it all. Good. Now I wanted to talk to you about something important. Nathaniel's land. He's been thinking about selling it. The property taxes are becoming difficult in maintaining it at his age. No, he'd never sell. That's where Michael's memorial is. Michael was a long time ago, Eleanor. Sometimes we have to let go of the past, move forward. And I found a lovely assisted living facility for you. Very upscale. They have memory care units. When you pass, Nathaniel will be alone, and he'll need someone to help him manage things. I've offered to. The recording cut off. Started again 30 seconds later. Eleanor's voice alone, confused and frightened. She's killing me. I know she's killing me. I just can't remember why. I can't remember what I'm supposed to do. Marcus sat in the truck cab listening to the rest. 40 minutes of Eleanor fighting her own mind, trying to hold on to awareness, trying to remember that she was being murdered, slowly, methodically, professionally. By the time the recording ended, the sun had set. Marcus's hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. The kind of cold, focused rage that had gotten him through 4 tours in places where human life was currency and death was negotiated in basements in desert compounds. He called Thornhill. I have something else you need to hear. That night, Marcus didn't go back to Seattle. He rented a room at a motel 6 blocks from the hospital, the kind that took cash and didn't ask questions. Ghost lay by the door, nose toward the crack beneath it, monitoring everything that moved in the hallway. At 2:34 in the morning, Marcus's phone buzzed. Dr. Grayson. The text was brief. Vitamin analysis complete. Thallium sulfate, 28 milligrams per tablet. Lethal dose is 10 to 15 milligrams per kilogram. At 1 tablet per day, Eleanor Whitfield was receiving enough to kill her slowly over 8 to 12 months. Call me. Marcus didn't call. He forwarded the message to Thornhill, then lay back on the bed that smelled like industrial cleaner and other people's problems. Outside, snow had started falling again. Not the violent storm of 2 nights ago, but steady quiet, the kind that accumulated without announcement. Ghost's ears swiveled toward the window, then toward the door. Then he was on his feet, the growl returning deeper, now more urgent. Marcus rolled off the bed, reaching for the Glock 19 he kept in his bag. The safety was off before his feet hit the floor. 3 men came through the motel room door simultaneously. The lock splintered, the chain ripped from the frame. They moved with professional coordination, spreading to cover angles, weapons raised. The first one made the mistake of focusing on Marcus instead of the dog. Ghost hit him at knee height, 94 pounds of muscle and fury. Teeth found the back of his calf, the Achilles tendon, and severed it with one savage shake. The man went down, screaming, his pistol clattering across cheap carpet. The second man adjusted his aim toward Ghost. Marcus was already moving the pipe wrench he'd borrowed from the truck's toolkit, swinging in a short arc that ended at the man's jaw. Bone cracked. The man's head snapped sideways with the particular looseness that suggested unconsciousness, or worse. The third man was smarter. He'd stayed in the doorway using the frame for cover. His weapon tracked Marcus with the steadiness of someone who'd done this before. On the ground. Now. Marcus dropped the wrench, raised his hands, took one step back. Ghost circled left, silent now, a shadow moving through shadows. Call off your dog or I drop you both. Ghost, hold. The German shepherd froze, but his eyes never left the gunman, calculating distances, waiting for the moment when commands became optional. Who sent you? Marcus asked. Does it matter? You were warned. You didn't listen. That's on you. The gun centered on Marcus's chest. At this range, the shot would be fatal, regardless of where it hit. And Ghost, fast as he was, couldn't cross 10 feet before the trigger pulled. But the gunman had made an error. He'd assumed Marcus was alone. He'd dismissed the first man still writhing on the floor, bleeding from his shredded calf. That man's dropped pistol lay 3 feet to Marcus's left. Marcus dove. The gunman fired. The bullet passed through the space where Marcus's head had been punched through the wall, embedded itself in the motel room next door. Marcus hit the floor, rolling, came up with the dropped Glock and fired twice. Center mass, the way he'd been trained, the way muscle memory took over when conscious thought, was too slow. Both rounds hit. The gunman staggered backward into the doorway, his own weapon discharging once more into the ceiling before he collapsed. Ghost was on him instantly, teeth finding the wrist of the gun, hand clamping down until fingers opened and the weapon fell. Silence, broken only by ragged breathing of the first man, still conscious, still bleeding, whimpering softly as the pain of his severed tendon registered fully. Marcus stood, checked each of the 3 men, one unconscious with a shattered jaw, one shot twice alive but failing, one with his Achilles tendon destroyed, no longer a threat. He pulled out his phone, called Thornhill. 3 men just tried to kill me. I need federal agents, now. Thornhill's voice was instantly alert despite the hour. You hurt? No, they are. How fast can you get here? 40 minutes, don't move. Don't talk to local cops. I'm calling this in as a federal matter right now. Marcus hung up, looked at Ghost, who sat calmly licking blood from his muzzle, eyes bright with the satisfaction of a job well done. Good boy. Ghost's tail thumped once against the floor. By the time Thornhill arrived with a tactical team, the motel parking lot was a crime scene, lights flashing red and blue against pre-dawn darkness. The 3 men had been secured, 2 in ambulances, 1 in handcuffs despite his injuries. Marcus gave a statement that took 47 minutes. Self-defense. Clear cut. Witnesses in adjacent rooms heard the door being kicked in, heard gunfire, could corroborate that Marcus hadn't initiated contact. But before the scene cleared, before Thornhill let Marcus leave one of the wounded men, the one with the shattered jaw, now wired shut and pumped full of morphine, decided cooperation might reduce his sentence. He wrote on a pad, handshaking. 4 words. Vivian hired us. Contract. Thornhill photographed the note, so added it to evidence. looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction with personal concern. This is attempted murder of a federal witness. I can bring charges against her today. Combined with everything else, we have enough. How long until trial? 4 months if we push. Federal court moves faster when we want it to. Marcus nodded. Then let's push. 3 days later at 6:41 in the evening, Marcus's phone rang. Hospital number. Dr. Reeves. Mr. Blackwood, you need to get here. It's Nathaniel. Marcus was in his truck within 2 minutes, Ghost beside him. The drive to Cascade General took 78 minutes through rain that had replaced the snow. He found Dr. Reeves outside ICU room 318, her expression carrying the weight of bad news delivered too many times. Someone spiked his hospital food. Acute thallium poisoning, massive dose. We're doing chelation therapy, but his organs are shutting down. Kidney function at 18%. Liver enzymes through the ceiling. At his age, she didn't finish, didn't need to. Chances, 15%, maybe less. Marcus looked through the window. The old man who'd survived hanging from a tree, who'd kept a lantern burning for 40 years, was barely visible beneath tubes and wires. Eleanor sat beside him, holding his hand, whispering words Marcus couldn't hear. He stayed at the hospital through the night. Thornhill arrived at dawn with federal marshals who secured Nathaniel's room, screened every person who entered, tested every piece of food and medication before it reached the old man's IV. The poisoning had been amateur in its desperation. A nurse later confessed to accepting $5,000 cash to add vitamins to Nathaniel's meal tray. She didn't know what the vitamins contained. She just knew $5,000 was more than she made in 6 weeks. Vivian had gotten sloppy, desperate, the kind of mistakes people made when control slipped away. Nathaniel hung in the balance for 13 days. Dr. Reeves had warned them. Organ failure at his age after that much thallium exposure was almost always fatal. The chelation therapy Prussian blue administered every 8 hours might bind. Some of the poison might give his kidneys a fighting chance, but the odds were mathematical, 15% survival. And even that number assumed everything went perfectly. Nothing went perfectly. His kidneys failed completely on day 3. Dialysis kept him alive, machines doing the work his body couldn't. His liver enzymes climbed to levels that should have meant death. His heart developed arrhythmias that required electric shock to correct. Eleanor never left his side. She'd regained most of her clarity as the thallium cleared from her own system, though gaps remained, memories stolen permanently. But she remembered Nathaniel, remembered 63 years of marriage, remembered that losing him wasn't an option she'd accept. Marcus visited twice a day, morning and evening. He didn't know why. The old man barely knew he was there. But Ghost seemed to sense something would lay his head on the edge of the bed, and Eleanor would stroke the dog's fur and whisper "thank you" over and over. On day 13 at 4:30 in the morning, Marcus was sitting in the ICU waiting room, unable to sleep, unable to leave. Dr. Reeves emerged from Nathaniel's room with an expression that defied medical explanation. He's awake, kidney function restored to 70%, liver enzymes normalizing. I've been practicing medicine for 22 years, and I've never seen a recovery like this. She paused, searching for words. Mr. Blackwood, that man should be dead. By every metric we have, he should have died on day 3. But he didn't. He fought, and he won. Marcus went into the room to find Nathaniel weak, but a conscious Eleanor crying beside him, their hands intertwined. The old man looked at Marcus with eyes that were clear despite the ordeal. You saved us twice now, Nathaniel whispered. Once from the cold, once from her poison. I owe you 2 lives I don't have left to repay. You don't owe me anything. Then I'll give you something anyway. When she goes to trial, I'll be there, Eleanor and I both. We'll make sure she sees what she failed to kill. That promise carried them through 2 months of recovery, through physical therapy and toxicology reports and depositions that Eleanor gave with crystalline clarity as the thallium left her system and her mind returned. The federal courthouse in Portland occupied an entire city block built from granite and glass in the modernist style of the early 2000s. Its steps rose in measured increments, each one the same height, the same width, designed to impart the impression that justice moved with deliberate precision toward an inevitable conclusion. Marcus Blackwood climbed those steps on a morning in late October, 10 months after he'd cut 2 people down from a tree in a snowstorm. The city had thawed and heated and cooled again, cherry blossoms giving way to summer, then autumn, but Marcus felt none of the seasonal changes. His suit was borrowed from Thornhill, too tight in the shoulders, the tie knotted by hands that remembered how to field strip a rifle but struggled with formal wear. Ghost walked beside him wearing a service vest that identified him as a working K-9. Federal courtrooms didn't typically allow animals, but Thornhill had pulled strings called in favors, argued that Ghost was evidence as much as witness. The dog had been first to sense danger, first to alert, first to protect. He belonged in that courtroom. The gallery was full. Marcus recognized faces from news coverage, from newspaper articles, from the investigation that had consumed the past 40 weeks. Eleanor and Nathaniel Whitfield sat in the front row, Eleanor's hand clutched in her husband's. Both of them aged beyond their years by what they'd survived, but alive present witnesses to the woman who tried to erase them, Dr. Isabel Grayson sat 3 rows back, her credentials having been challenged, defended, and ultimately accepted. Beside her sat Russell Thornhill, still wearing his off-the-rack suit, still looking like a man who'd chosen duty over comfort so long ago he'd forgotten there was a difference. And in the defendant's seat, flanked by 4 attorneys who'd collectively billed $7 million over the course of the trial, sat Vivian Ashford Harrington. She looked smaller than Marcus remembered. Not physically diminished, but somehow compressed, as if the pressure of scrutiny had forced her to occupy less space. Her auburn hair was still perfect, pulled back in a style that cost $200 to maintain. Her suit was Chanel navy with gold buttons, the kind of armor worn by women who'd learned to fight in boardrooms where actual weapons weren't permitted. But her eyes had changed. The confidence Marcus had seen in the hospital room, that absolute certainty of control, and had developed cracks. She smiled at her lawyers when they leaned in to whisper. But the smile no longer reached her eyes, no longer carried conviction. The bailiff stood. All rise. The United States District Court for the District of Oregon is now in session, the Honorable Patricia Chen presiding. Judge Chen entered from chambers, 63 years old, appointed during the previous administration, with a reputation for meticulous attention to evidence and zero tolerance for theatrics. She'd spent 4 days reviewing the case before trial, another 17 days hearing testimony, and now on day 18 the jury had returned with a verdict after 5 hours and 42 minutes of deliberation. Marcus had learned to read juries during the trial. The 12 citizens who'd been selected, vetted, and sworn looked like America in miniature. A retired school teacher, a construction foreman, a software engineer, a nurse, people who'd taken 3 weeks from their lives to decide whether Vivian Ashford Harrington was a murderer or a victim of circumstantial coincidence. They filed in without meeting her eyes. That told Marcus everything he needed to know. The forewoman was a woman named Patricia Moss, 57, who taught high school English for 32 years before retiring. She held the verdict form with both hands, her expression carefully neutral. Judge Chen spoke. Madam Forewoman, has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree regarding Eleanor Whitfield, how do you find? Patricia Moss's voice was steady, clear, the product of 3 decades projecting to the back of classrooms. We find the defendant guilty. Vivian didn't move, finding her lead attorney, a man named Harrison Blackwell, who commanded $1,200 an hour, placed a hand on her arm. She shook it off with a gesture so slight it might have been imagined. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree regarding Nathaniel Whitfield, how do you find guilty? On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find guilty? The litany continued. 5 counts of murder in the first degree, 1 for each of the exhumed bodies that Dr. Grayson had analyzed them, finding thallium arsenic, and in 1 case a rare plant toxin called aconitine that mimicked heart attack symptoms. The bodies had told stories that death certificates had tried to silence, and juries believed bodies more than paperwork. Dr. Grayson's testimony had lasted 4 hours across 2 days. She'd walked the jury through the science with the patience of someone who'd taught complex subjects to people who'd never studied chemistry. Thallium sulfate is a heavy metal compound, chemical formula T(L2SO4), at the dosage found in Mrs. Whitfield's vitamin tablets, 28 milligrams per tablet. A person taking 1 tablet daily would accumulate approximately 840 milligrams over 30 days. She'd displayed slides showing Eleanor's blood work. Normal thallium levels in humans are less than 0.02 micrograms per liter. Mrs. Whitfield's levels on admission were 340 micrograms per liter. That's 17,000 times normal. At those concentrations, the symptoms mimic Alzheimer's disease almost perfectly. Hair loss, peripheral neuropathy causing memory issues, vision disturbances, exactly what Mrs. Whitfield's doctors documented over 8 months. The jury had leaned forward following the science becoming story. The half-life of thallium in the human body is approximately 8 to 10 days with chelation therapy. Without treatment, it's 30 days or longer. This means Mrs. Whitfield was being dosed consistently, repeatedly, with no breaks. This wasn't accidental exposure. This was systematic, calculated poisoning designed to kill slowly while appearing natural. 2 counts of fraud, 3 counts of witness intimidation, 1 count of attempted bribery of a federal officer after Vivian had offered Thornhill $500,000 to lose the evidence file. By the time Patricia Moss finished reading, Vivian Ashford Harrington had been found guilty on 14 separate counts, each one carrying its own sentence, each one another nail in the coffin of the life she'd built from other people's deaths. The gallery remained silent. In federal court, outbursts were rare. Justice here was delivered with the cold precision of mathematics, not the drama of television procedurals. Judge Chen spoke again. Mrs. Ashford Harrington, do you have anything to say before sentencing? For a long moment, Vivian said nothing. Then she stood smoothing her suit jacket with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. When she spoke, her voice carried the same cultured tones Marcus had heard in the hospital, but underneath, something had broken. I built an empire. From nothing. My father left me $400 million and I turned it into $2.8 billion. I created jobs. I developed communities. I made this region prosperous. She paused, and when she continued, the mask finally cracked. These people were obstacles. They stood in the way of progress, of development, of everything that makes this country great. They were old, useless, taking up space that could be used for something better. I did what was necessary. The gallery stirred. Nathaniel Whitfield made a sound like a wounded animal. Eleanor gripped his hand tighter, her face pale. And you, Vivian continued, turning to look directly at Marcus for the first time since the trial began. You were an accident, a variable I didn't account for. Some broken soldier with a big playing hero, destroying years of careful planning. You should have taken the money. You should have walked away. But men like you never do you? You cling to your pathetic sense of morality while the world moves past you. Harrison Blackwell was on his feet trying to pull his client back down, trying to silence her, but Vivian shook him off again. I regret nothing. Not the planning, not the execution. Only the failure. Only that I didn't account for the randomness of a snowstorm and a man with nothing better to do than interfere. Judge Chen's gavel came down once sharp as a gunshot. Mrs. Ashford Harrington, you will be silent or you will be removed. Vivian sat, but the damage was done. Whatever slim hope her attorneys had harbored of appealing to mercy, of arguing for leniency, had evaporated. She'd confessed in open court not to save her soul, but to wound those who'd stopped her. Judge Chen consulted the documents before her, then looked up. Vivian Ashford Harrington, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers on 14 counts of murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, and related charges. The evidence presented shows a pattern of behavior spanning 30 years, resulting in the deaths of at least 9 people and the attempted murders of 2 more. You have shown no remorse. You have demonstrated that you view human life as an obstacle to profit. She paused, removing her reading glasses. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. Additionally, you are ordered to pay $75 million in restitution to the victims and their families. Your assets are to be seized and liquidated to satisfy this judgment. You have 30 days to appeal. Bailiff remand the defendant into custody. 2 U.S. Marshals moved forward. Vivian stood, and for just a moment her composure returned. She straightened her jacket, lifted her chin, and walked between them as if she were leaving a business meeting rather than entering a cage that would hold her until death. But as she passed Marcus's row, she paused. Their eyes met, and in that moment Marcus saw something he recognized from combat, from the faces of enemies who'd realized too late that they'd miscalculated. Not fear. The absolute fury of someone who'd built an empire in the belief that money could solve everything, only to discover that some things couldn't be bought. Then she was gone, led through a door that closed with a mechanical precision, and the courtroom began to empty. Marcus stayed seated. Ghost pressed against his leg, the dog's warmth, a point of contact that anchored him to the present. Around him, people moved, talking in hushed voices, processing what they'd witnessed. But Marcus heard none of it. He was thinking about rope and lanterns, about an old woman whispering warnings about the 48 hours between finding victims and becoming someone who mattered. Eleanor Whitfield appeared beside him, Nathaniel supporting her with one arm. She looked at Marcus with eyes that were clear now, unclouded by poison or confusion. "Thank you," she said simply. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Our son died in a war we didn't understand, fighting for reasons we couldn't explain. For 40 years, Nathaniel and I lit that lantern, hoping—" She trailed off, then started again. "Hoping he'd find his way home somehow. And I think he did. Through you." Nathaniel extended his hand. Marcus took it, feeling the fragility of bones held together by will and stubbornness. You gave us our lives back, the old man said. Whatever time we have left, it's because of you. They left together, moving slowly through the courthouse corridors, and Marcus sat alone with Ghost in an emptying courtroom, wondering if Jack Rivera had sent him up that mountain, if the dead guided the living toward redemption, if any of it meant anything beyond the simple fact that two people were breathing who shouldn't be. Thornhill found him 20 minutes later. You okay? Fine. Liar. Thornhill sat in the row ahead, turning to face Marcus. I've been doing this 16 years. Seen a lot of verdicts. This was a good one, you know that, right? I know. But it doesn't feel good. No. They sat in silence. Outside, through tall windows, autumn leaves drifted past on a breeze that carried the promise of winter. She's not going to last long in prison, Thornhill said quietly. Women like her, they need control the way other people need oxygen. Take it away, and they suffocate. I give her 6 months before she finds a way out. Or something that looks like it. Either way, she's done. The empire sees the money's frozen, the lawyers are fighting over scraps. Everything she built is dust. Marcus looked at Ghost, who'd settled into a sprawl across 3 chairs, content in the way only dogs could be when their human was close. What about the land, the Whitfield's property? Protected. Federal trust administered through a nonprofit they're setting up. Called it the Whitfield Justice Foundation. $15 million funded by the restitution and some private donations. They're using it to help victims of elder abuse, domestic violence, financial exploitation. Eleanor's idea. She remembers everything now. Most of it. Dr. Grayson says the thallium did permanent damage, but she's functional. Better than anyone expected. Thornhill stood straightening his tie. Listen, there's a ceremony next month. They're dedicating the foundation headquarters up at Cedar Ridge near the memorial. They want you there, both of you. He meant Ghost. Marcus nodded. We'll think about it. You do that, and Marcus, whatever you're planning to do next, wherever you're going, you should know this case is going to generate attention. People are going to want interviews, book deals, movie rights. You're going to be famous, whether you want it or not. I don't want it. I know, but it's coming anyway. Thornhill paused at the end of the row. FBI's hiring consultants, people with your background, your instincts, pays decent, better than welding, if you're interested. I'll think about that too. Thornhill left. The courtroom emptied completely. Just Marcus and Ghost and the afternoon light and slanting through windows that had witnessed 1,000 judgments, 1,000 endings, 1,000 people discovering that justice was real but incomplete, that winning didn't erase the cost. 4 days later, at 2:17 in the morning, Vivian Ashford Harrington was found hanging in her cell at the Dublin Federal Correctional Institution. She'd used strips torn from her designer suit, the same Chanel she'd worn to sentencing, tying them together with knots that would have impressed any Navy SEAL. The note she left was 11 pages written in perfect cursive on legal paper her attorneys had provided. It began with a confession. Not the reluctant admission of the courtroom, but a detailed accounting. 9 murders, not 5. 4 more that hadn't been discovered, bodies that had been cremated before anyone thought to ask questions. Her father, her uncle, her stepmother, a business partner who'd threatened to expose accounting irregularities. She described methods, dosages, timelines, how thallium mimicked Alzheimer's, how arsenic looked like food poisoning, how aconitine stopped hearts in ways that fooled coroners who weren't looking for poison. And she explained why. Power is oxygen, she wrote. Without it, I cannot breathe. From the moment I understood that money could buy anything, silence, anything, fix anything, I was addicted. Each death was a problem, solved, an obstacle removed, a path cleared. I felt no guilt because guilt is for people who believe in consequences. I believed in control. The letter ended with a paragraph that Thornhill read to Marcus over the phone, his voice flat with the exhaustion of a man who'd spent 40 weeks chasing this moment only to find it hollow. I chose death because it is the last thing I can control. They've taken everything else. My money, my empire, my future. But this final choice, this final act of will, remains mine. I die unrepentant. I die unbowed. I die proving that even in defeat I decide my own ending. She'd signed it with her full name, dated it, and left it positioned where the morning guard would find it first thing. Marcus listened to Thornhill read standing in the parking lot of his trailer, Ghost sitting patient at his feet. The autumn night was cool, crickets singing in the grass that grew between broken asphalt, and somewhere down the row, a television played canned laughter through an open window. You okay? Thornhill asked when he finished. You keep asking me that. You keep not answering. Marcus considered. Was he okay? A woman was dead by her own hand. 9 families had closure they'd never expected. 2 elderly people were planning the rest of their lives instead of their funerals. The world was measurably better than it had been 10 months ago. But Jack Rivera was still dead. Afghanistan was still a wound that wouldn't close. And Marcus was still living in a trailer, still welding steel for $18 an hour, still wondering what any of it meant. I'm the same as I was, Marcus said finally, just with better stories. Thornhill was quiet for a moment. The dedication ceremony is next week, Tuesday 10 in the morning. Eleanor asked specifically if you'd be there, said she has something for you. I'll be there. Good. And Marcus, the FBI thing. The offer's real. Think about it. The call ended. Marcus stood in the parking lot watching Ghost investigate a patch of weeds that had sprouted through the asphalt and thought about offers and futures and whether either mattered to a man who'd learned to live in present tense one day at a time, waiting for the next crisis to give him purpose. The following Tuesday, Marcus drove back to Cedar Ridge for the 3rd time. The mountain road was clear now, autumn sun burning off morning fog revealing vistas that winter had hidden. The pine trees stood green and full birds calling from their branches, the whole world alive in ways that seemed impossible to reconcile with the memory of snow and cold and 2 people hanging from a tree. The memorial site had been expanded. The original stone marking Michael Whitfield's service remained, but around it now stood a small building, cedar-sided and stone-founded, with windows that caught the light and threw it back gold. A sign above the door read, Whitfield Justice Foundation, established 2024. Cars filled the small parking area. Marcus recognized Thornhill's sedan, Dr. Grayson's Subaru, and several official vehicles with government plates. A crowd of perhaps 50 people milled around the entrance, dressed in the careful casual of people who'd been told this wasn't formal, but wanted to show respect anyway. Eleanor and Nathaniel stood at the center greeting visitors. Eleanor wore a blue dress, her silver hair catching sunlight, and when she saw Marcus approaching with Ghost, her face transformed. Not just smiled, but became young again, the way people do when joy surprises them. She met him halfway, moving with more strength than Marcus had seen in the hospital. You came. You asked. I did, because I wanted to tell you something. She gestured toward the building, toward the memorial stone, toward the mountain that had almost killed her. For 40 years, I kept that lantern burning. Every winter, no matter the weather, Nathaniel and I came up here and lit it, hoping Michael would find his way home somehow, hoping the light would guide him back. She paused and Nathaniel joined them, his hand finding his wife's with the automatic comfort of 6 decades together. He's not coming back, Eleanor continued. I know that. I've always known that. But you came instead, and maybe that's what the light was always for. Not to bring back the dead, but to guide the living to where they're needed. From her purse, she pulled something small and brass. The Coleman lantern, polished now, its glass replaced its wick trimmed. The same lantern that had burned in impossible conditions, that had marked the place where death waited and help arrived. I want you to have this, she said. Keep it. And when you find yourself lost, or when someone needs help, light it. Because that's what lanterns do. They show the way. Marcus took it, feeling the weight, the history, the silent promise contained in brass and glass. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just promise you'll light it when it matters. I promise. The ceremony was brief. A local pastor said words about redemption and second chances. Nathaniel gave a speech about his son, about service, about the idea that love didn't end with death, but transformed into something else, something that could guide strangers toward each other when guidance was needed most. Then Eleanor spoke, and her voice was strong, clear, the poison finally gone from her system and her mind. 10 months ago, I was dying, slowly, deliberately, at the hands of someone who saw my life as an obstacle to profit. I was losing myself piece by piece, forgetting my husband's name, forgetting my own story, becoming a ghost in my own body. She looked at Marcus, at Ghost, at the crowd that had gathered to witness justice taking root in mountain soil. A stranger saved me, a man with his own ghosts, his own pain, his own reasons to turn away. But he didn't turn away. He stopped. He listened to his dog, who knew better than any human that something was wrong. And because one man decided that 2 old people mattered, I'm standing here today. We're standing here today. Her voice broke. Nathaniel's arm went around her shoulders. This foundation exists because we believe every life matters. Every elderly person forgotten in a nursing home, every woman trapped in an abusive relationship, every child caught between adults who should protect them but don't. We believe they all deserve someone to stop to listen to act, she gestured to the building. This is Michael's memorial. Not a stone, but a place where help begins, where people can call when they need rescue, where they'll find someone who believes they matter. The applause was genuine, sustained. People moved forward to tour the building, to sign the dedication register, to make donations and promises, and all the small commitments that built futures from tragedies. Marcus stayed outside with Ghost sitting on a bench beneath a pine tree, the lantern resting beside him. Thornhill found him there an hour later, after the crowd had thinned and the official photographs had been taken. You think about my offer? Yeah. And Marcus looked at Ghost, who'd found a patch of sunlight and collapsed into it with the absolute contentment of a creature living entirely in the present moment. No past, no future, just warm sun and a human nearby, and nothing else mattering. I'm not ready to work for the government again. Maybe not ever. Fair enough, but if you change your mind, I know where to find you. Thornhill left. The afternoon stretched toward evening. Marcus sat with Ghost in the lantern in the mountain silence, thinking about Jack Rivera, about Afghanistan, about all the things that couldn't be changed and the few things that could. Eleanor found him as the sun began its descent toward the western ridges. You're not staying for dinner. Need to get back. Long drive. Of course. She sat beside him, moving carefully, still healing from months of systematic poisoning. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you believe in God? The question surprised him. Marcus considered before answering. I don't know. I used to. Then I saw things that made me doubt. Now I'm somewhere in between. I believe, Eleanor said quietly, not in the simple way I did when I was young, but in something, some force that moves through the world, connecting people who need to be connected. Michael died in a war I'll never understand, fighting for reasons that still make no sense. But his death led to that memorial, which led to our tradition, which led to us being on that mountain the night you drove past. She touched the lantern. Maybe God works like this. Not miracles and angels, but coincidences and timing. A man taking the wrong road at the right time. A monk who knows when something's wrong. An old woman who fights through poison long enough to whisper a warning. Marcus didn't respond. He wasn't sure he believed in divine intervention, but he'd stopped being sure about most things years ago. I'm grateful, Eleanor said. Whatever brought you to us, whatever force or chance or random luck, I'm grateful. And I think Michael would be too. She stood pressed a kiss to the top of Marcus's head with the casual affection of a grandmother and walked back toward the building where her husband waited. Marcus sat until the sun touched the mountains, painting everything golden red. Then he stood, called Ghost, and carried the lantern to his truck. The drive back to Seattle was quiet. Ghost slept in the passenger seat. The radio played classical music, something with strings that sounded like memory made audible. And in the bed of the truck, wrapped in a blanket, the brass lantern rode secure. 3 months later, Marcus left the shipyard. Not for the FBI, but for something simpler. The Whitfield Justice Foundation hired him as a field investigator, following up on cases of elder abuse, financial exploitation, missing persons. The pay was modest, but steady. The work was hard, but meaningful. Ghost became certified as a therapy animal, visiting nursing homes and assisted living facilities. His presence somehow detecting when residents were being neglected or abused, his absolute refusal to approach certain caretakers serving as an early warning system that saved lives. They moved out of the trailer into a small house on the edge of the city with a yard where Ghost could run. Marcus planted flowers he didn't know the names of, learned to cook meals that required more than a microwave, and discovered that life could be measured in small improvements rather than large traumas. He kept the lantern on a shelf in the living room, polished and ready. Some nights he'd take it down, light it, and sit watching the flame dance behind glass. Remembering snow. Remembering rope. Remembering the moment when turning around had led to this, a second chance neither earned nor deserved, but granted anyway. On the anniversary of the rescue, Marcus drove back to Cedar Ridge with Ghost. The memorial site was quiet, no ceremony planned, just the two of them and the mountain that had witnessed everything. He lit the lantern as the sun set, placing it at the base of Michael Whitfield's stone. The flame caught, held, burned steady despite the evening breeze. Ghost sat beside him, gray beginning to show in his muzzle now, his movements a little stiffer, but his eyes still amber and aware and deeply impossibly knowing. Marcus bowed his head. Not a formal prayer, but something close. Oh Lord, if you're listening, thank you. For Jack, who gave his life so I could have mine. For Eleanor and Nathaniel, who reminded me why that life matters. For this dog who's been more faithful than I deserve. And for second chances, however they come. He paused, then added, "Help me use this chance right. Help me find the people who need finding. Give me the courage to stop when others drive past. And when my time comes, let me go knowing I didn't waste what you gave me." The lantern burned, the mountain listened, and somewhere in the gathering darkness, Marcus thought he heard an answer. Not words, but a feeling. A sense that the dead weren't gone, just transformed. That love didn't end, it changed frequency. That light mattered not because it showed everything, but because it showed enough. He stayed until full dark, then extinguished the lantern and drove home. Cedar Ridge stood silent under stars that had witnessed 10,000 endings and 10,000 beginnings. Some stories ended here. Others like this one were just beginning. Marcus Blackwood would never be whole. Afghanistan had taken that possibility. But he'd learned to be useful, and in the arithmetic of broken men, trying to justify their survival useful was enough. Ghost would age slow, eventually leave. All dogs did. The lantern would burn until it didn't, and somewhere always there would be people who needed help that wasn't coming, who whispered warnings no one was listening to, who hung in the balance between death and rescue. Marcus would find them, not because he was a hero, not because he'd been chosen, but because on a night when he could have driven past, he'd stopped. And that single choice had taught him the only lesson worth learning. That light, however small, however fragile, however temporary, was always worth the match. Always.